Hello and welcome to the College Fairs of Greater Denver. We're so excited to have you participating in this event. We have some fantastic panels for you today. My name is Jenny and I will be your facilitator for the College Essay and Insider's Guide. Before we get started, we have a few housekeeping items. Your camera and microphone are off, so panelists cannot see or hear you. You can use the Q&A button on your screen to type your questions to our presenters at any time. This is just one of many different sessions happening over the next couple days, so be sure to check out the schedule on the website. This presentation is being recorded and will be available at strivescan.com/greaterdenver. I'd now like to turn it over to our panel, Tina and Grace.
Awesome. Hello, everyone. I'm going to screen share really quickly. Hopefully you can all hear me okay, but my name is Grace Lloyd. I work at Grinnell College, and we're a small private liberal arts college located in Iowa, and I'm really excited to be able to talk about basically the college essay and all the ins and outs that go into it. I'll let Tina take over and introduce herself.
Hi, my name is Tina Barr. I'm an Assistant Director of Admissions for Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University. On the flip side, we are a STEM-based university. Campus is behind me. This is our Prescott, Arizona campus. We also have one in Daytona Beach, Florida. But we're really excited to share information with you guys. I do think that this is such a truly important topic, especially right now. As we all know, this has been an incredibly challenging couple of years, and usually you'll have the opportunity to travel and visit campuses, meet us face to face, and obviously the struggles are real with that this year. So one of the most important things when it comes to the college essays is preventing you guys from essentially just being letters and numbers on a screen for us. When you guys have that essay, one of the best things of that, the personal statements, the essay, is being able to really stand out among all those letters and numbers that we have. And so I'm so excited to be a part of this and to share some of that information with you guys. So one of the things I wanted to share with you guys just a little bit about myself before we start our actual presentation. So I was first generation myself. And I wanted to share that with you guys today because for me, I had a lot of fear around sharing that story and really telling my truth. I was embarrassed by it. And so I didn't initially really put that in any of my college essays because I was honestly ashamed of it. It wasn't something that I took as a sign of pride. And so I luckily had somebody that stepped forward and offered me the suggestion of what a difference that would make for me. And it really did. So one of the things I just wanted to stress today before we really kick things off is just recognizing what your strengths truly are. And we really value your honesty and you guys sharing that with us. Grace, I'll turn it back over to you.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Tina. Yeah, when we're talking about the essay, what we really do want to focus on is, the purpose of this, and we want to be here as a support. And so one thing Tina and I both want to say is if you have any questions, like we do have a Q&A option, you can feel free to put questions in the chat. We are going to run through our presentation first, just because we might, end up answering some of the questions you have before, we actually get to that slide, so you'll see it. But we'll be sure to have a chunk of time just set aside for answering questions after we run through some of these slides. And so one thing we wanted to start with is just talking about what is the purpose of the personal statement or the Common App essay. And so when thinking about your application, there are so many different ways that you are sharing information about who you are. And so using the essay as the one place where you're writing about something about you, a story, something important to you, something you're passionate about, that is not available anywhere else in your application, that's what the personal statement is for. So it's not about reiterating something that's already been described in depth. It's about giving us a snapshot. It's also not about just, rewriting your resume or your extracurricular list, because we already have that too. So it's really your time to share with us who you are, something that you think defines you. I know that can sound stressful to try to choose a topic based on that, But I honestly think that there are so many different ways to approach writing an essay. It's always great to talk to other people about the topics that you're considering. And like Tina said, it's just really good to have people that you can share your ideas with, share this process with, know that you're not alone, whether it's talking with an admission counselor like one of us, or someone at your school, or friends. It doesn't have to be a professional college related person when you're working on this. The other big thing, of course, is that the personal statement gives us an example of your writing ability. And so if, the school you're applying to does not have a supplemental essay or anything like that, this is your only chance to show us how you write and what your grammar skills are and things like that. So it's also important for demonstrating those types of skills. And then we've already kind of touched on this, but it's to let us get to know you on a personal level. So who are you? What makes you you? What makes you different, right? What is something we don't see anywhere else that you really think is important to know? So getting to know you on that personal level is the other big purpose of this. Tina, I don't know if you wanted to talk about the purpose of a supplemental, like one of those required or optional. Grinnell does not have these, but some schools do have supplemental essays. I wasn't sure if Embry-Riddle does.
We do actually. So we refer to ours as the personal statement. We do have some suggested prompts on our website, but not all colleges will have, here's a list of questions and choose what you want to answer. So for us, we leave it really open-ended because it can be about your passion for taking care of dogs at your local humane society. It can be something along the lines of what I shared earlier, how you're first generation and why attending college is so important to you and your family. I mean, it doesn't need to be something that is going to shock and awe us. It's just meant to be something that lets us know a little bit more of who you are. Like Grace was saying, we just want to get to know you on a personal level so that you're not just letters and numbers on a screen to us. So anything that you're passionate about, I seriously got overly excited about reading about someone who's been volunteering at the Humane Society because I love cats myself. So again, any way that we just get to know you better.
Yeah, and just be sure with all of the essays, because, some schools do have supplemental ones, some do not, some just have the Common App essay, some have multiple essays. Make sure you read the prompt. That's actually one of my big pieces of advice. Always read the prompt closely, really look at it and think about it, because there's a reason that they're asking whatever question it is. And so with a personal statement or Common App essay, you might have different options to choose from, of course. It's much more open-ended, but with those supplemental essays, they often are much more direct ways that they're asking you questions. So they're usually a little less open-ended. And so one thing that we wanted to go through is some of the don'ts and do's of writing your college essay, because that's actually, I think, a lot of times the questions that we get, are related to, should I do this or should I not do this? So like I said before, you should not reiterate your resume, extracurricular list, or transcript. It's already available to us. We do not need to see that again. You do not need to over-explain that or write it out again for us. Really use this as a time to talk about something else. It can be a part of your resume, a piece of your extracurricular list, about a class that you're passionate about, but it should not literally just be that again. Another don't is to not mention colleges in your essay. You might be applying early decision. That's wonderful. It's still generally a good idea to avoid mentioning the name of a college, because it can be really tough when I'm reading an essay and at the end of it, it says, and that's why I want to go to Embry-Riddle. And I'm like, oh, this student clearly, we're not their top school, right? It's not that it means we wouldn't admit that student, but it does affect our read of that application. So be very careful when you are mentioning schools. And I always think it's better to err on the side of not mentioning schools. The other don't that I actually see this quite a lot is writing just one large paragraph. Think about when you are writing papers for school and you have section and paragraph breaks and indentations, so it's more like an essay and not just a block of text that we have to get through. It just is harder on us as readers when there is, even if there is grammar, but when it's just a block of text, it's just a little tougher to get through. So try to break it up, make it interesting, and where there is a natural break, just like in an essay you might write for school, feel free to make a little paragraph break for it too. Another thing is don't talk about someone else exclusively. Maybe your best friend is an incredible human being and you admire them so much. That's awesome. Please, like, yeah, of course you can write about them, but make sure you tie it to you. Make sure at the end of that essay, we understand why you're telling us about your best friend, because they've affected you, they've changed you. So if you just write about your best friend, we will want to admit your best friend, right? Make us want to admit you and use your best friend as a way to get to that. So just make sure that you're not exclusively talking about someone else. Bring yourself into it. Another, a couple actually of grammatical or typo-based things. Avoid run-on sentences, please. I think like I said, your essay is actually also an example of your writing ability. And so run-on sentences, or when you, like in the next bullet, if you write there, and there incorrectly, or apart versus apart, we notice those things. And it's not like we're, taking notes and saying, oh, there was a typo here with a red marker or anything like that, but it affects how we read it. It does, make us think, okay, this is happening, like this is multiple grammatical errors. There's going to be errors, it's okay, but just try to read for them. And one tip I always like to give students is, first of all, have a bunch of people read your essay, like have your friends, your family members, your teachers, if you're comfortable, just a random person, because they will read your essay and they will find things that you missed, whether it's a typo or, whatever it could be. Another thing that is my other tip with grammar is if you basically select your entire essay, so highlight the whole essay in Word or whatever your word processing document or program is, and make it bigger in font size, because then the mistakes become more obvious. It's amazing. It's one of my favorite tricks, because you've been staring at exactly the same size font and the same, everything. And if you just increase that size, glaring errors pop up that you didn't notice before. So that's my other trick. And then the last don't be funny unless you're sure you're funny. It can be really hard to read an essay where I know that the student is trying to make a joke, make the reader laugh. If it's not funny, it's tough. So I always just want to be honest. There are great funny essays. Some of my favorite essays that I've read have been ones with a lot of humor in them, but make sure it is funny. Show other people. If they're not laughing, if they're saying that it's kind of falling flat, that tells you something. So if you're writing an essay that's more on the humorous side, I think it's even more important to have other people read it over and look at it to make sure that they think it's funny too. So that's my don't list. Now Tina will go over the do's.
Hello again. So some of the do's for your college essays. Do tell us something we cannot find in another part of your application. So you've heard us stress that a couple of times. You'll probably hear us stress it one or two more times, because it really is the best possible outcome for you to submit this college essay, in the sense that, again, this is your chance to really stand out. I personally love it when I see essays that come in with a story. In fact, right before this, I was going through some of my applications and I read a beautiful story about how this young man's passion for engineering started in elementary school when he was a part of First Lego. And he had beautiful details in there about building some of these Legos through First Lego. And it was just so on point for what we were about to do for this. Please share the essays with your friends, family members, anyone that's close to you, people that aren't close to you, just to, again, get that feedback. They might catch things that you would not, and friends and family members sometimes might be a little bit nice. They might not be as transparent about anything that could be adjusted or shifted within your writing as people that don't know you as well. So it's definitely good to get different perspectives. Again, triple check for those typos and grammatical errors. One of my all-time favorite tips that I've ever received for this is actually to read your essay out loud. So when you read your essay out loud, I'll take a step back. When you read your essay on a computer screen, your brain will automatically adjust for what it's supposed to say. But when you read it out loud, you'll actually trip over the words because your brain doesn't have time to adjust for it. So my personal favorite grammatical check trick is to read your essay out loud. Again, feel free to be funny if you shared it with people and you're sure that it's funny. I can't say I've gotten too many on the funny essays. It makes more sense with the liberal arts. And again, use your words and your voice. This is your opportunity to use your voice for us to really hear you, quite literally through a computer screen.
So that's technically like our full, like, written out presentation. I did actually also want to say, my name is now Grace Robertson Lloyd. I did just get married recently, and so sorry that it's the old name in there. I haven't updated the slideshow. It's very recent. But if you want at any point to contact either Tina or I, please know you can take a screenshot of this. This is being recorded, and we'll also drop our contact information in the chat so you can reach out to us at any point. But right now, I think is a great time if there are questions to feel free to put those in the Q&A section, and we'd love to address some of those.
Grace, we had one that came up. With many students being raised in single parent homes, is it relevant to share details? Do you want to start with that?
Yeah, sorry, I'm just reading it. I mean, I think when it comes to your essay or including things in general in your application, make sure you're including things that you think the reviewers should know about you. So if, for example, you were raised in a single parent home and you want to make sure that your readers know that, of course, definitely feel free to use that. Know that there are spaces in your application to include that information, not just in your essay. In every common application, there's actually an additional information box that I always encourage students to put information in. Because whether it's about, how COVID has affected you, whether it's a contextual situation with your family, your living situation, maybe a grade, you want to explain a grade or the rigor in a class that, maybe you didn't do so well in, that additional information box is a great place to put that. And know that if you don't put that information in and it's not available elsewhere in your application, we're not able to address it or to include it as part of our review of your application. And so I would just make sure that you're thinking, is this something I want to make sure that application reviewers know about me? Tina, do you have anything to add?
I would just add, certainly one of the situations where I do see personal statements being relevant for this specific topic is if it's impacted their grades at all. So certainly if there's a semester where the grades dipped a little bit because there was something happening within the household where they lost a parent or anything along those lines, I definitely think it's beneficial to have some type of personal statement or to include that in an essay. So there are certainly situations, especially if they impacted the grades at all, where I think that's really beneficial. All right.
Yes, I'm going to stop screen sharing so I can see the chat a little better, but I will drop our contact information in the chat as we're going through more of the questions that are here, because it looks like quite a few are coming in, which is great.
Yeah, we've got how long should an essay be? And then they just have questions about font size and double space. I can kick this one off by saying, yes, please do not have itty bitty baby fonts. There are too many times where I have to increase the screen size to like 160 or even 200% just to be able to read it. So I think 12 and above, 12 or 14 is usually perfect. Grace, feel free to speak otherwise. I'm a big fan of space and a half. I don't often do the double space myself. But Grace, do you have preferences on that?
Yeah, I was just gonna say that it does depend also on what application you're using. So if you're applying through the Common application, I believe it actually automatically formats it to a specific size and font, which is great. But for other like supplemental essays or certain schools that use their own applications where you have to submit it as a document that you upload, very different. So yes, I would say it's always a good idea to do like 12 point, that sort of thing. And then with the length of the essay, I mean, I've read some essays that are perhaps a little too short. They're one paragraph, they don't really dive into things super deeply. And then I've also read essays that are perhaps too long. That I can tell that they went to the word limit and maybe they didn't need to. And so I always think, personally, I was an English major, so I'm always like a little picky, but like think brevity as well. Think like, are you sure that you're getting your point across in the most effective way? And there's no right or wrong length, but if you are not able to get your point across, then that might be the wrong length. And so that's also why it's important to show it to other people, to share this with other people who will say, oh, I think you can add a little more because I'm kind of missing part of what you're trying to get at. Or maybe someone will say, you repeat yourself a lot, or there's a lot of run-on sentences. Another great thing also, active voice. Try to avoid passive voice. If you're not familiar with that, that is totally okay. But it's basically when you, it's a way to shorten your writing, make it more exciting for the reader. And it often includes a lot of like concise writing, which I think all college admission counselors definitely appreciate. And just in general is a good tip when you're writing any sort of essay. So yeah, great question though.
So we've got two that are pretty similar, but asking about how to pick something interesting to write about and how to make an essay stand out. So those are kind of similar topics. I would definitely say, for me, that's definitely a struggle, especially understanding like we have an open-ended essay, right? So it's, there's not necessarily a specific topic. And sometimes those are the hardest ones where it's like, talk about anything. It can get a little overwhelming. And so my recommendation is always just talk about something that you're passionate about. You're usually applying to certain colleges for certain degrees that you're passionate about or that you're particularly interested in. So again, why are you interested in that specific degree? Were you passionate about Legos as a small child and shifted to engineering after that? We're also quite well known for our pilot program. So as a small child, did you get to hang out in the cockpit with a pilot and you just had this desire to permanently fly in the skies for a career path? Grace, anything you'd like to add there?
No, I think that's great. I think it's really tough to identify like exactly what you want to write about or what might be the best topic. I think that's actually probably the hardest part, more than editing or writing even, but just choosing your topic. But I really do think like there are so many different ways you can go, right? Some students will write about, like you had mentioned, working at the Humane Society, volunteering, or some, like one of my all-time favorite essays, because there was also a question of, can you give an example? One of my all-time favorite essays was about someone who's really bad at swimming, but they kept swimming. They were the worst on the swim team. They were very slow, but they loved it. And it was just it was a funny essay. It was very wholesome. And it just showed like perseverance on this student, that they will continue because they love it, even if they're not going to win medals. And I really, really love that essay. It has stuck with me. And that was a few years ago. Just because
I like that too. That's so cute.
Right? Like, and that's not a topic that you would not necessarily think of, because I think a lot of times also with the essay, people feel pressured to tell something very personal or something that they're proud of and that they want to highlight. But sometimes it's okay to tell us just a story. As long as we still get something about who you are, that's the most important part. So there's not a right way to choose a topic, but if you are feeling good about it, I think you can tell internally if you're proud of what you've written and if you think it's sharing what you want to be shared. Yeah, but it's tough. It's really tough.
Grace, I'll read another one for you to answer if you'd like to start with it. On average, how much time is spent reading or rereading an essay?
I assume you mean for the counselor or for like us as admission counselors. I mean, it depends on the school. So not just speaking from Grinnell. I mean, Grinnell is a holistic review school, so we read everything that is submitted to us. So if you submit us a portfolio, if you send a really long essay, if you send part of a book, we'll read it. And so however long it takes to read it. I know that's not the greatest answer. But I do think it's important to always like talk to admission counselors and ask about their review process. Not every school can do holistic admission. Not every school can review every single application very closely. And so it's good to ask those questions. I know at least for Grinnell, we read everything. That's also why I highly recommend you not submit your 100-page book. Please don't do that. People have done it and it's exhausting.
Oh, wow.
It doesn't matter how good it is. It's a lot of time. And, you know, think about the fact that somebody is reading this and, you know, maybe an excerpt, 2 to 5 pages, that's fine. 100 pages, really pushing it, really pushing it. But yeah.
Liberal arts life.
Yeah, liberal arts life, yeah.
So Scott, we have another question here. Let's see. This one's a little bit longer. So if we have an essay that we write for a specific prompt or even a more general prompt, and multiple schools have the prompt on their application, can you use it in multiple instances? Can you also use it for college essays? So I would say, yes. So I was a college counselor for 10 years. Perhaps I should have mentioned that earlier. That said, you guys, senior year is stressful enough, and any way you can find to cut things down that's stressing you out in any way, shape, or form is beneficial. So as Grace mentioned earlier, when you're doing something like that, though, make sure to keep it fairly general. Do not put the names of the college in that, just in case you copy and paste and then happen to hit submit before you realize, oh, I probably should have taken out that one sentence because it was specific to the last school. So I definitely encourage students to use the same letters. You know, you don't have to come up with a unique one for every single school that you're applying to. Grace, anything you want to add there?
Yeah, I think that's great. Grinnell, again, is a school that doesn't have supplements. And since we're a common application school, your personal statement, unless you alter it in some way, I'm not even sure if that's possible, but it goes to every school. That's what's nice about the common application. It's the same application sent to every single institution that you apply to. So you don't have to fill out multiple applications, which is great about it. But yeah, so it's actually built in that is an option that you can just use the same personal statement as well if you want. And so rarely do I see students type the name of a school in their essays, but it does happen, and that's why I wanted to mention that because it hits a little different when we see that. So and there's a question also, really short one, but are students typically writing these essays during their junior, senior summer break? I think that is completely up to the student. I feel like I hear from students a lot that they spend their summers before their senior year often because they've thought more about it. Maybe they've thought more about what colleges they're applying for. But actually, Tina, as a past college counselor, when do you think is either the best or when is most popular for students to be writing their essays?
I usually would suggest to students to do it in between the summer of their junior and senior year. So if you can write a couple of general essays, so typically what I suggested, and this was a little bit more specific to scholarships, but since that was in one of the questions, scholarships are generally going to ask for one of two letters. They're going to ask for a letter that talks about you as an individual, or they're going to ask for a letter that talks about why you're interested in a certain degree field. So if you can write those two general letters or essays over the summer, you can just tweak those according to any college or scholarship that you might be applying to. So if you can do that between your junior and senior year, I know it's painful to think about doing any work sometimes for school during the summertime because you kind of just want to restore a little bit. But that's one thing that can make a huge difference. Your brain is a little bit more rested, so you're less likely to make some of those grammatical errors even. I definitely find that that was the best time that I would usually suggest to students to start on those. We also have another question about are mental health issues a taboo subject? Grace, do you want to start with that one?
I think that's a really good question. It's definitely, I think, an important one. And I really think it's about the comfort level of the student. And I don't know if necessarily taboo would be the right word, right? I think it's more, is the student comfortable sharing this and thinking that this needs to be shared? And if the answer is yes, then I don't think that's taboo, right? And so I think in general, just again, making sure that whatever you're writing is something we should know as application reviewers. We should know about you before we admit you to our school. And so whether that's a challenging time in your life, a mental health issue, whatever it is, I think it's truly about your comfort level with what you're writing. And it's, yeah, I think it's also really good to be asking those questions if you have a college counselor and you're comfortable talking about it with them as well, just because it can be also very challenging to write about those sorts of personal situations. And so having somebody to talk to about it or to think through it can help, but it's all about your comfort level, truly. Tina, I don't know if you wanted to add anything.
Yeah, I would add, I've gotten quite a few of these, honestly, over the last 2 years for understandable reasons. I mean, everybody, I think, has had struggles on and off over the last 2 years. And so, again, I would say what's most relevant for us is if it impacted a student's grades. So let's say they were an A/B student, but then one semester, maybe there's one D and a couple of Cs, something that's going to stand out to us as kind of a flag or a concern. If there's a reason there and you're comfortable sharing that, as Grace mentioned, it definitely comes down to comfort level. I would say that would be something that I've seen over the last couple of years increase. And I don't think, so I've been doing this now, I've been working in admissions now for about 14 years. And I definitely understand the question because absolutely there used to be a huge taboo around it. And I believe that it's a healthier climate that we live in now where that's open to discussion and people encourage that to be discussed. So as I mentioned at the start with my story, I was embarrassed of being first generation. And so I completely understand the comfort level when it comes to that specific conversation. But I'd say I've definitely seen more of that over the last couple of years, understandably. And if it does have any relevance to the grades, I think it's helpful for us to see that.
Yeah. And the only other thing I just thought of also is relevance to also your extracurricular activities or how you think like other parts of your application might stand out. So let's say you've been very quiet in class and you're not sure how your letters of recommendation will write about you. Giving this context can be helpful. But again, it's about your comfort level. That is the most important thing. But I really liked what Tina said about how this is it change, I think, in the industry and just like in general, where the climate in the world is more healthy for students to be able to talk about these concerns and personal complications that they're facing. There are a couple of questions, or sorry, were you going to say something?
Probably the exact same thing you're about to say, so go for
it. There's a couple of questions that are really good about like formatting and tone, right? Yeah, exactly. Which is a great question. And I think that's also, a really complicated one because there's no right way to format. So one of the questions, for example, is should the format of your essay be more like a written book or a school essay? I mean, it's what you're comfortable with. I know that sounds like, oh, we're saying that so much, but I've read essays that are written as poems. I've read essays that are written as pure, this is the funnel that we all read about and are taught to use when we are writing our own essays for school, for classes. And so I think you can do whichever one you prefer, and also whichever one you think best fits the story that you're telling or the topic that you're writing about. And so personally, I'm a big fan in my own writing of telling it more like a short story and that sort of thing. But if you're more comfortable with more professional language or something like that, that is completely fine. Because that's also a question, how professional should the essays be? I've read some essays that are very colloquial, and then I've read some that are maybe like more formal, I would say. I think the one thing is you don't want to be too colloquial, too relaxed. You don't want to use acronyms without explaining them, that sort of thing. Don't want to use jargon that we would not understand. And then on the other hand, you also don't want to write too formally. And if I have to pull out a dictionary to understand what your essay is about, that's probably not an effective essay in the same sense. So just remember that you're writing to people who are reading this, who are taking the time to spend reviewing your essay. So make it digestible for us. Again, not too overwrought, but not too casual either, because we don't want to read it like it's a text message, because that's the other side of casual. That's a little too far in one direction.
We have one question on here that's kind of along the same lines, so seems like a good follow-up one. But what's the best way to organize an essay? So this is actually one of my favorite hacks. So for a moment in time, I actually taught creative writing. That said, when you are writing something like an essay or really any type of writing, one of my favorite things to have students do, after you have finished writing it, cut it up so you have each paragraph separately. And so you want to actually see if you can put it back together the way you wrote it. And so why this works so interestingly is the flow really kind of comes out. And all of a sudden you might notice, oh, actually this paragraph works better as a starting paragraph, or this is a great closing paragraph. So that is one of my favorite hacks, if you will, for organizing any type of writing. Grace, have you heard that one before? I see you getting all excited there.
No, I love that. I have not heard that. I've done where I've just moved I do this all the time, where I usually write out the body paragraphs of essays and I don't write the intro or the conclusion until, I've written out the meat of the essay itself. And then I feel like I now have a better sense of how I want to introduce it. So that's what I was going to say, but I love the idea of just even moving things and making sure that the flow is the best it can be. Again, no perfect way to organize your essay, but lots of really fun tips, which I love, sharing different writing tips. I think that's awesome. There is a question about, there's a couple of questions actually more about like topics, like can I write about future plans? Can I write about extracurriculars? Yes, you can write about those things. I think the big thing is you just don't want to, if you're writing about your extracurriculars, you don't just want to list them. If you're writing about your future plans, we need to know why. So tell us why before we are asking ourselves that question. That's also why when you show it to someone else, they might say, this was a good essay. It's really cool that you want to be a veterinarian. Why do you want to do that? Where does that come from? What do you want to do with that? What's the rationale behind this? And so I think giving us the why is the really important part. And that's the same with the extracurriculars, or if you're writing about something that you're like a class you're really passionate about, or department or subject, whatever, just making sure that you're including the why and where did that come from, and not just saying, this is what I want to do, because that doesn't actually tell us that much about you. It just tells us that, okay, that's what you want to do. Diving in a little deeper and asking yourself why too, I think can be really powerful. So reflection, incorporating that into your writing can be really helpful regardless of the topic.
We have another one that's kind of similar. The statement we had said kind of it's a chance to get to know the students. Is it really about getting to know the student's character? I would say it's not necessarily just getting to know the student's character, but truly about getting to know the student. So certainly smaller schools such as mine, we do have that more holistic approach. So, I'm just passionate about getting to know the students. If I haven't had a chance to meet them in person and I haven't really gotten to develop kind of their personality through meeting them, there's a chance to develop that type of personality through what we're reading. And so whether it's about the character, if there's something that particularly stands out about the student's character, then that can be a great thing to write about. But just really anything that really shows, again, we keep saying this term, but who you are, what you're passionate about, why you want to attend one of these schools. There's so many different ways to direct those personal statements or college essays. So it doesn't need to be about the character. But if it's incredibly relevant to the particular individual writing about that, they had a life-changing moment where their character shifted or something like that, character development in those 100-page books you get, they're great.
There you go. Yeah, I love that. I think that's thinking about it as like you're sharing who you are, your character. I also just want to remind everybody, whether you're a parent, a counselor, a student, we also know that you're in high school. You might not know who you are yet, right? You might still be exploring things so please don't feel pressured. Is this who I am? It's okay if it changes. It's okay if it's, one small part of you that you just want to share. Don't feel pressured to spill your life story or to feel like you have to know everything about yourself, because you don't. I still don't. Most people don't, right? And so just know that you don't have to feel like you have everything sorted out. And don't think that we are thinking, oh, this student clearly doesn't know who they are, what they want to do. We're not thinking that. We just love getting to see what you chose to share with us and hearing some stories from you.
Yeah, one of the first things I usually say to students when I do get to meet them in person is, it's okay. You don't have to decide your entire life right now. I'll be honest, guys, I changed my major 8 times.
Exactly. There's no pressure.
We have this quick one. Speaking of, we understand you're in high school, this does kind of carry over. I've heard of people hiring tutors to help write college essays. Is this becoming the norm? Does this put students at a disadvantage that don't do that? I will say, if any of my students have ever done that, I've never noticed it. I'm definitely looking for a sense of authenticity that comes through. So I could see somebody maybe hiring someone to have grammar check or something like that. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. I think you should have enough resources between friends, family members, and your school. Because for me, I want something that comes across as more authentic. And if it's being written by somebody else, I would have a hard time believing that it might be as authentic, and it might come across as too cookie cutter. Yeah.
No,
thoughts on that, Grace?
No, I think you summed it up really well. I don't know exactly how popular that is, because I definitely don't get told that somebody is helping them with their essay. But I do think, to the point of, does that disadvantage students that don't have access to it? I mean, that is tough, right? I think it can really disadvantage certain students. But when we are reviewing applications, again, depending on the school, but with holistic review schools that review every part of this, we're looking for those different contextual clues. So we know what a student's situation is, what resources they have access to, whether that be at their high school or outside of it, things like that. Obviously it's imperfect, but it's something, it's a way for us to get a little context as well. And yeah, I think I'm not sure how popular it is, but that's sort of my initial instinct.
Just answer them. We were running a little bit short on time. We only had a moment or two left, so I figured I'd just type them really quickly.
Yeah, thank you all so much for these great questions. It was awesome.
Yeah, hope that was helpful to you guys. Thank you guys so much for being here this evening.
Mm-hmm. And our contact information is in the chat. And as a reminder, thank you. As a reminder, it is Grace Robertson Lloyd. So it looks different in this context, but if you search me on Grinnell College's website, you'll see my new name. So yeah.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, both Tina and Grace. We really appreciate both of you being here today. This was a fantastic and informative and insightful panel. So thank you so much and taking the time to answer all of those questions. Really appreciate it. And just to echo that you can still reach out to them. Their contact info is in the chat again. So if you have any other questions, please feel free to do so. And thank you so much for joining us today. When you close this window, there will be a link to a very quick 5-question survey. We'd appreciate any feedback you can provide. And we encourage you to check back to the schedule and sign up for more sessions over the next couple days. There's lots of fun sessions going on. And you'll be able to find this session's recording if you want to view it again, as well as all of the other session recordings at strivescan.com/greaterdenver. That's strivescan.com/greaterdenver. Thank you again. Have a great evening.